Great. I remember when we met in New York, Luis. I was so impressed by the work that we at that point had were able to exhibit at the Center for Architecture. That the next time I flew to London, I flew on United instead of Virgin. It was paid for by Porcelanosa. They said, "Don't you want to fly on Virgin first class?" I said, "No, I want to go on United so as to see the Queen's Terminal, to see the terminal at Heathrow that you'd recently completed." And I think, as I've told you more than once, I think it's the best airline terminal in the world. It was, in terms of my travels, the one that I most enjoy seeing. And I've become a United customer largely because they hired you to do it. But your practice is much larger than just the aviation projects, which have given it an international reputation. And we'll be seeing some of that today, and I won't presume to anticipate which projects, although we've talked about it a little bit, which projects you'll show. The context of what we're doing, as you know, is pretending, if you will, that we're in Madrid. We're all very disappointed that we're not physically in Madrid. We were fortunate before the pandemic with other students in prior classes of this program to have field study in Paris and London and Los Angeles, and fairly intensively look at 20 different construction sites, recently completed projects, or offices. Sometimes they overlapped, and we'd meet in an office and go to a site. And it was immersive. Every meal together, hotel together, drinking late at night together. And I missed that experience because seeing your face on the screen is better than not seeing it at all, but it would have been great to be in the same room. So to the degree that you could make your work and particularly work in Madrid and other things that are happening in Madrid contextualized, palpable for us, that would be amazing. That would be what we're trying to do with 9 other offices, some of whom you know, probably all of whom you know. I don't think they're direct competitors. We were yesterday with Javier Cami from AECOM, and he mentioned in passing the importance of the project at in the north, Nouveau Norte. And I know that you've been very much involved with that, both with Richard Rogers and on your own. And I'm hoping that we'll have a chance to talk about that, because the AECOM discussion was necessarily abbreviated because I'm not sure they have such a direct relationship to the project that, as you do. But I don't want to anticipate. I said I wouldn't, and here I am doing it. So with no further ado, we have a critical mass. I think a few others will join us as we go along. And I'll turn over the floor to you, Luis. And please share your screen when you wish to, and we'll have maybe half of the program for presentation, however long or short you want, and the rest of it for interactive discussion. You'll be followed, by the way, at 11 o'clock by Ginés Garrido of Burgos Garrido. And I told Ginés by email if you would like to join a few minutes early to overlap. We're using the same Zoom link, so people here don't have to exit and re-enter. So I hope that's not in any way a problem for you. And we are recording. So
fantastic. Thank you, Rick, for this introduction and presentation. I am delighted to be here. First of all, I just wanted to make sure that you see my screen.
Yes.
Okay. So I was very intrigued about the subject that you are covering about cities. I believe cities are a fascinating living organism which changes every second. And I thought trying to understand cities and key issues like, real estate and construction technology, public-private partnership and analytics and visualizing would be very interesting. Why is this not working? Fantastic. Here you go. So I would start by saying cities have to comply with the 4 aspects that I've summarized on 4 words that start with C. The first one is compete, because competition brings the best out of all of us. The second one is cohabit, because every time we have more people in the planet, more sources, more religions, more languages cohabiting in our cities, so we need to learn to cohabit. The third one is to cooperate. We need to share information, energy resources, security. So there's lots of things to cooperate. And finally, cities have to be super well connected. So if cities fail on those 4 C's, they will fail to continue to be on the avant-garde of cities and on the, on the future of what this planet is striving and moving forward. Now, this is another metaphor. This is part of a necklace, part of a much bigger system. So, buildings in themselves are nothing if they don't connect, if they don't belong to a succession of a chain necks like this. So no matter how beautiful a building is, if it's not in its context, if it's not having a dialogue with the rest of its neighbors, then again, it won't fail. So you have to think as a city, as neighborhoods, and as buildings, as part of a much wider system. And talking about Madrid, I hope that you do come here very soon. If you had come now, this is most probably the building you would have seen as you landed in Madrid. This is what I call the front door to Madrid, and probably for many, the front door, the first image of Madrid and Spain. And I happen to be very lucky. I worked on this building at the age of 27 with Richard Rogers and my previous practice in Spain. And we are now currently working on its expansion as well. So 25 years later, it's proved to be small already. And this would be one of the images of the interior you would have. Just to put it in context, I hope you see my mouse. The building we just saw is where my mouse is moving. And the one on the left, the one colored in yellow, so that's a terminal building, that's a satellite building, which is where you would have arrived. And just to put it into context, because people don't realize how big those buildings are. They are over 1 kilometer long. You see on the background, Madrid skyline, you see the 4 towers. The tallest tower is 259 meters. If you were to put the terminal building up in vertical, it would be this size, 1.142, so 1,142 meters tall. But we're now expanding it. We're now making it even 360 meters longer. And just to give you an example, the Burj Khalifa, which is the largest building in the world, is 828. So once the new terminal building is constructed, it would be like building 2 Burj Khalifas, one on top of each other. And the reason why I bring this into context is about the real estate decision-making. What makes a city, what makes a country take a forward decision to build an infrastructure like this? And what's its value? Definitely, its value is not how much it costs to build. Its value is how much is the front door to Madrid? How effective can this airport be to compete with London Heathrow's hub or with Frankfurt's hub? What type of other advantages and circumstances does this piece of infrastructure bring in connection with high-speed rails, with other parts of the country? So it's extremely difficult to put a value to something like this. And I will come back to other similar issues on value. So the airport is up here on the top right-hand corner, and we're moving on to the first project I want to talk to you about, which is in Africa. Madrid, let me put this other picture, sorry. This one. Madrid has a central spine, which runs from north, where my mouse is, all the way down to the south. So there's two train stations in Madrid, one on the north, one on the south. And this is AFCA. AFCA was built here. Here's the other train station. AFCA was built in the 1970s as a business district for Madrid. And it takes this huge city block, which you see here on the top left. And it's just opposite, for those of you that like football, soccer, is just opposite Real Madrid's football stadium. So just here, where my mouse is there, that's a Real Madrid's football stadium. And this building we're going to talk about was built very early in the so this is how AFCA looks. Those are the buildings that have been built. On the back here on the right, you see the 4 towers that we saw on Madrid skyline from the airport. So those are relatively smaller. They will be about between 100 and 150 meters in height. And the building that we got commissioned to transform, and I will explain why, was a building that had no identity, had no scale, no technology whatsoever, and therefore was a building that was empty and nobody wanted. And you see here the way the question mark is, that's where the building actually is. It's actually got an address, Castellana 77, the number of the street. You used to get onto a taxi and say, please take me to Castellana 77. And the drivers wouldn't know what it was. You know, they couldn't take you to this building. It's right there in the middle of that island, AFCA, as I was saying, the financial district. And this is the appearance it had at the time. Completely empty, nobody wanted it. It was acquired by a developer and turned around to us and say, what can you do with this building? Well, the first thing we did, we gave it a hardcore at its core. On the left, you can see where my mouse is, you can see the 3 elevators and the fire escape and the building services around the core. And the first thing we did, we just basically radicalized the core. We kept the elevators where they were, but we changed all the restrooms. We kind of reorganized, shifted the building services, but most important, we moved the staircase onto one side in order for you, when you come out of the elevator, you can have a nice view out. Because previously, when you came out of the elevator, you had to exit through one door and then get into the office space, either left or right. So now, by changing the core, we were giving a lot of more value to the actual floor plan. The second thing we did, was we used software that was available to us at the time and another one that we developed. So we combined different softwares to understand how the sun hit this building. Because if you may remember from the image before, this is a completely isolated tower, which has 4 very pure facades, very pure, I mean, a north, a south, an east, and a west facade. And the heat conditions are completely different in Madrid. And therefore, you have to design thinking on every orientation. So by virtue of this software, we developed hundreds of different shading elements for each individual facade. One of the things we actually found was that when the sun is vertical, which is normally on the east, on sunrise, the best shading devices are vertical. And as the sun progresses, when the sun is low, and then on sunrise, and when the sun comes up, as the day evolves, the sun continues to rise into the sky. It becomes more vertical, and therefore the best elements to protect the facade are horizontal. And then there's a transition that works well between the vertical and the horizontal. And so we actually analyzed the east facade to find out that at 11 o'clock in the morning, which is not a bad hour, 58% of the facade would be in shade thanks to those blades. And by 1 o'clock, which is the worst condition, the hottest sun, 98% of the facade is covered, is not receiving any solar radiation. And we did the same for every orientation. I'm just showing you here the west facade. The previous one was the east facade. And again, at the worst hour, 4 p.m., 97% is covered. And this is the before and the after. You can see on the left, the building that no one wanted, and on the right, the building that emerged out of this system, using technology and applying, construction technology to making something which at the end is extremely functional, very elegant, and also provided us with other fun bits, like, for example, at day it's unlit, but then at night it can be lit, and there's lots of different things you can do with it. You can use colors or, rainbow. So now the building has an identity. And surprise, surprise, it's full. So there's not a single square feet which is not leased, even post-COVID, and has become the second most expensive building in Madrid per square foot in terms of rent. So obviously the client is very happy. Let me show you a quick time lapse. Some of you may think, why, let me pause it here. Sorry. Some of you may think, why do these shades don't run all the way through to the south facade? It's very simple. There's an adjacent building right here which belongs to someone else. So therefore, the air rights that govern this building that could potentially grow on height is what is stopping those horizontal shades to run all the way through the south facade and join the blades on the west. So we used a different type of glass and a different system on this bit here. So this is where we were, where my mouse is. This is where we were in Castellana 77. So now we come down Castellana, Paseo de la Castellana, and we come to this place here. This is a different developer, a different client, who is the owner of those two towers here. They're called Colón Towers. This is Plaza de Colón, Columbus, which is probably, I would say, the most interesting urban challenge Madrid faces. And so they sit here in a corner, and they were built from the top down. They were built in end of 1960s, using a construction technology that was in fashion at the time, called suspended architecture, which basically meant, in this case, there are no internal columns. Basically, you have a central core. From the central core, you have a big concrete head from which tensors hang or suspend, and therefore the floor slabs go from the core to the tensors. Okay, so this was the building in the 1970s. Following that, in 1990s, so, and I've never found out how much this building cost at the time, and you will have to annualize it, obviously, from 1970. So in any case, in the 1990s, a British company who owned them initiated a complete remodel, which consisted on a new skin, which is this orange thing you see. So it actually had two skins, the original one and the new one. They built a new escape stair, which is this thing in between. And to support this stair, they built a huge beam from where the stair was suspended. And then they, capriciously put all these kind of green things around to conceal the beam, and two laser showing up onto the sky. And in the 1990s, the current owner bought these towers for 50 million euros. In 2017, they had an offer for 160 million. So in 17 years, the cost of these towers had risen by more than 3 times. Now, why would the client be interested in selling these towers? One, the floor space was very limited and very small. As you can see here, the net available floor to let as an office space is what you see in purple, and every other thing else you see in white is the gross area. So it had a gross to net of 50%, which is extremely inefficient. Secondly, the towers were not connected. So you couldn't have 2 floors on the same level. You couldn't cross from one to the other unless you came out to the open through the fire escape. And thirdly, the floor was so small, 200 square meters or 2,000 square feet is not a very good office size. So we actually had a go at this tower, and before the client decided to sell the towers for 160, they were really in favor of selling. They asked us, what will you do with the towers if you could? And I said, well, the first thing I would do is I would get the elevators, as you can see here in black. So 3 plus 3 is 6. And I would add an extra one. I would build 7 and we'll put them outside of the towers. Second thing I would do is I would eliminate the fire stair and build 2 new stairs inside the cores, which are those 2 things that you see here. And the third thing I would do is I would demolish the restrooms, which is what you see in green, and I would put them into the cores. Then join the towers, and suddenly you have 1 floor plate, which is sufficiently big to be attractive for the market, completely liberated of obstacles like fire escapes and restrooms. And as you can see here, this is basically our conceptual proposal. We went from a gross to net of 50% to a gross to net of 81%. There was a proposal that had the elevators on the middle, then they eventually ended up here on the north, as you see. So this was enough for the client to decide not to sell the towers and to commission us to take this project forward. So the next thing we did was, the city regulations were very clear. We couldn't increase the total area of the building, but we could shift area from places to other places. We acknowledged the importance of going higher. We also acknowledged the impressive views we have from up there. And this diagram, this axonometric, shows very clearly what we did. I explained before, we're getting rid of the antenna up here. We're getting rid of all this fire escape. But then the original access was through the basement. So we moved the access to ground floor. Then we demolished 2 entire floors, here and here, the ones you see in purple, because they didn't really have the best quality. And we chamfered all the corners, and all of that area is what we moved up here. So I know the diagram looks incredible or impossible, but it is absolutely perfectly square. 20,298.3 square meters. And this is what is currently being constructed. It's under construction right now. This will be the new entrance, the one we've brought down from the basement. This is a new terrace that we are occupying. With the demolishment of one of the floors, we get a much nicer height, and we can actually provide this terrace either to the city. So there's a plan to have an escalator down from the plaza and have an open cafe restaurant up here, or it can also be leased to one of the tenants of the towers. This is an image rendering from the Colón Plaza at night. This is some photos of the current construction site. You would not believe the state of the footings that we found. There is an underground river, and for the last 50 years, that river's been washing away most of the soil, so they looked like they were being suspended by the air. And there's more than 80 people down there. They've been working for 6 months, 80 people down there, repiloting the footings, or the footing of each of these towers. An incredible construction process, extremely complicated. But my question to you is, what will be the economic value of these towers after our intervention? If you remember, it went from 50 to 160 just 5 years ago. And the current valuation post-COVID is saying that these towers, when they're completed next year, they will be, if not anything above 400 million. So that to me is very, a good investment for a developer. And I thought I would leave it here for questions, because I think it's more enriching to answer questions than continue talking about buildings. I just wanted to show you 2 examples, which I think covered the 4 topics that Rick set me. Real estate value, decision-making, construction technology, and the use of data and visualizations. I've left public-private partnerships. I have a hospital, if you want to talk about. We've done a number of hospitals under that model, but I thought I would open it for questions now.
I want to, first of all, thank you for a superb presentation. We had the benefit of having a drink together in Lima last week and talking about what students have been doing their research projects on this past semester. And as you mentioned, real estate and valuation and construction technology were very high on the list, of 4 topics. These projects are amazing, and putting the architectural and real estate parameters together in cojoined, gets us out of the typical architecture school aesthetic, and the same with Castellano 77 with the starting point of heat gain. There's a logic to everything that you presented that is also, I have to say, as an architect, just quite beautiful. So thank you for that. I have many questions, but I'm going to defer mine to the end and give the floor to students, particularly those who were involved with both the construction technology and the real estate research projects. I'm sure they have many more cogent questions than I might at this point. Who wants to go first? Yes, Akash.
Thank you, sir, for the beautiful presentation. My question is, like you were talking about Castellana 77, you invented that facade by using softwood. So how do you find fabricators for such thing when you invent such a thing? I guess it is not very easy to find a fabricator.
No, I mean, we were very lucky because we did it in-house. We have, in this case, this was an architect who maybe had 3-4 years experience. He had gone out. He's the guy that made possible the all the cladding on the Botín foundation that we designed with Renzo Piano in Santander. So if you go there, you will see that building's got 9,000 ceramic discs around a complete sphere. And he kind of developed this passion for complex things. And so, you know, he was the first one to stand up, and because, you know, we're doing trials and trials, but when you join trials, you know, you normally do 5, 6, 8 versions. You don't do hundreds. And he stood up and said, let me do it. And he did it.
And
So
just to
normally,
end on the note.
yeah, no, normally it's the passion, it's the vision and the passion that get things done.
Thank you, sir. And wishing you a very advanced happy birthday, sir. I researched about you on Wikipedia, and your birthday falls on 16th, so happy birthday in advance.
Thank you. Yeah, my birthday is on Sunday. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Other questions? Yes, Terry.
Could you hear me, Professor?
Yes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vidal. Thank you for sharing your experience. It's very wonderful experience, I think. And my questions is about when you do your renovations and how to make sure that you could get a profitable building. I mean, like, you develop a less profitable building to become a more profitable one. And how do you incorporate your design to be a more profitable building? That's all. Thank you.
Okay, it's a very interesting question. I think that in a way, throughout our career, we have been developing a reputation. We are extremely functional architects, but we are all very user conscious, so we think about the user. And it's the combination of understanding functionality, understanding how people will use the building, how people that maintain and run the building operate, and then making things which are appealing from the city. If you remember at the beginning of the conversation about the necklace, and you know, you have to understand that every building is part of a much larger chain. And when you do all those things, you're really adding value. And when you add value, you are definitely increasing the profitability, which is the word you were using. You're increasing the profitability, but not only in monetary terms, you're increasing the profitability of society. You know, if you design a bad building, for at least 50 years, people that walk past that building will suffer it every single day for more than 50 years until someone demolishes that building. If you design a good building, everyone walking past it will enjoy it and will extract something from it, something different every day. So how much is that worth? Take me back to the question at the beginning. How much is Madrid Terminal 4 worth for Spain? Or how much is what Rick was saying before? You know, Heathrow's Terminal 2. How much is that worth? I can tell you the client paid £800 million for that. But that building is far more valuable for London than £800 million. So getting good architecture and good engineers is very profitable. If you get a good design team, you're adding value to your investment. And you're adding a lot of value, much more than what they're going to cost.
Thank you, Mr. Vidal.
Thank you.
Luis, I have many questions out, but Lin Shi has one, and I'm sure it's an excellent one. So please.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for your presentation. My question is, have you ever met any construction difficulties during the processes, and have you ever applied any new technologies to solve the problem?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's my question.
所有的帅哥都爱我们。
So I believe the question is if we have encountered difficulties in the construction process while building. Yes? I guess that was your question, Lin Shi. And the answer is yes, not only on renovations and rehabilitations, like for example, on the two towers I've just explained, we found amazing things. The towers, for example, are leaning 40 centimeters each forward. So the tower's not vertical. So, you know, but they're doing 5, 20, and 40 centimeters at the top. That means you cannot build a vertical facade, as we all thought we could build a vertical facade, because we're very constrained about the buildability. We cannot increase 1 single square feet of a building. It means that you cannot come out and design a facade that will take up more footage at the bottom if it's vertical. And we found all types of difficulties in Castellana 77. We found the original concrete was extremely poor. So the moment we started intervening the core, the building could collapse. So we had to reinforce the entire core. And in fact, one thing I didn't explain in Castellana 77 is that there we have 2,000 additional square meters that can be added to the building. And the only way to add those 2,000 square meters, actually like 20,000 square feet, is vertically. It's the only place to put them. So we actually took the view, we reinforced the entire core, because one, we needed it because the concrete was poor, but two, we took the opportunity to reinforce the core so in the future the client can build 3 additional stories on top.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
I have a somewhat related structural question. If the transfer beam that had been used to suspend the stair was adequate to take the weight of the new stories going up, or were there other structural changes that were necessary at Cologne to be able to add the additional floors vertically?
No, I can't remember off the top of my head, but the 1990 intervention, which is the additional facade and additional stair, was done on the safety coefficients of the original building in 1970. Okay, so the structure was not reinforced in 1990. However, we took all that load off the building, but added extra load, which again could be taken, with the exception of 2 of the additional 4 floors that go on top. So we've had to reinforce the core to take the load of those 2 floors. And incidentally, by the way, we've kind of retained the original philosophy of the building, not by suspending the 4 floors, but by cantilevering them. So the core continues to grow, and then every floor plate is cantilevered. So again, we have no columns whatsoever. And here we've left 5.5 meters of height between floors.
A related question, because in New York, we're still obsessed by the Twin Towers, the symbol of having 2 things that are the same, but not really connected. By connecting these 2 towers, you created, as you eloquently said, a larger floor plate that relates to the market conditions now. But were the business demographics significantly different in terms of the original occupants of the smaller floor plates? Was it designed for a different type of enterprise that then became obsolete? Or who are the current tenants? I mean, I get a sense of who the building owner is, but is it financial services? What types of businesses are looking for the larger floor plate?
Okay, I'll answer a question that I thought you were going to make me, which is by joining the 2 towers, we've obviously perjudicar. We have given the towers a worse wind condition, obviously. So before they behave more independently, now as they're together, they have a more difficulty with wind. That was superseded. If you remember, I explained at the beginning, we have a new tower at the back which contains the new elevators. So that tower is acting as a tripod. and helping the two existing towers. Okay?
Yeah.
Your other question is, it's gone. You asked
Well, the new valuation is perhaps dependent on a different type of occupant.
So the towers were when the current owner decided to vacate them. So they just let all the leases expire and didn't renew any lease, and that took them about 2 years. And the companies that were there were typical financial services, a bank institution, insurance companies, small law firms, that type of thing. The client is currently considering leasing the two towers to one single tenant, and there's 3 potential candidates, or having multi-lease and leasing it in the same way as they did before.
Yeah.
But I think they need to make the decision by the end of March this year, just because if they lease to one single tenant, then obviously there's implications for the construction.
Yeah,
They may want restrooms in a different way, or they may want some finishes, or whatever.
A somewhat related question that you touched on at the beginning was the impact of COVID in Madrid, on office market. We could also talk about that in regard to aviation work. I was amazed by how full all the flights were, how many people are traveling again. That's a separate issue. But in New York, there's a lot of uncertainty that students were focusing on about, whether firms will downsize their leases with more remote work or increase the amount of space because people will spread out more. Is there a pattern that you're seeing in talking to developers for these towers in Madrid?
Every single developer I speak to has the same answer, and they're all saying we will return to pre-COVID conditions. It may take longer or lesser, but everybody's convinced we will return to those type of conditions. By the way, when these towers were designed, they were designed to a standard of 15 square meters per occupant.
Yeah.
When we did this new project, we had to bring them down to 7 square meters per occupant. So, we've more than doubled the population of the towers. Which brings issues about health and safety and evacuation routes, blah, 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 blah.
I muted myself so you don't hear the other phone ringing. But, anyone else have a question while I turn off the other phone? Well, I'll bring it back to the aviation question then. A lot of your work is, as you described, not just for the beautiful airport in Madrid and the one I mentioned in London, but elsewhere around the world, relates to aviation facilities. Are people in that business as assured that things will bounce back to pre-COVID levels? The guy from AECOM, Javier Cami, yesterday was talking about the numbers of passengers at the Barajas airport in Madrid. I forget the number, maybe 1.9 million per year in 2019. I have it written down in my notes, but I didn't pull it up. But the numbers are from 2019. When the world stopped, or at least caught its breath. What's happening now in Madrid as it competes as a hub, as you were describing with Frankfurt and London?
Yeah, in Madrid, as you know, we are doing now the extension of both the terminal building and the satellite.
Yeah.
So the Spanish Aviation Authority is convinced that the numbers will pick up. I mean, we actually won this contract in January 2020, so 2 months before COVID.
Yeah.
We signed the contract in January, and then obviously COVID came and the project was put on hold probably for about a year. And 1 year later, they decided to continue moving ahead with it. There's two interesting pieces of information on this, which not everybody know. During COVID, airlines retired many pilots and many planes. Because obviously, if you need to have a plane operational to fly, you need to spend money on its maintenance. So what happened post-COVID is that there's less planes and less pilots around. Until you can actually acquire new planes and get more pilots ready to fly, that is why you see planes full, because they're less around. The other issue is the industry is kind of settling that the aviation industry will be back to normal mid-year 2023. So in about 18 months, we'll be back to normality.
Well, let's hope. I have one last question that's somewhat related. Knowing the international nature of your practice, with offices in other countries, including the U.S., you also have significant links to the UK, not just because of the projects that you've done there, including at Heathrow, but your formation, your education, your participation in RIBA. Before COVID, there was so much speculation on the impact of Brexit on other European capitals, and financial centers. And when you were talking about, the airport competing with London, competing with Heathrow or Frankfurt as a hub, are you finding any outflow or reinforcement of financial industry in Madrid as a function of Brexit?
No. I think the biggest moves on the financial sector have been towards Germany. There's very little come to Spain, not Madrid or Barcelona. Some European institutions have been kind of scattered and shared among different countries, but we haven't seen a big influx of business or people coming from Brexit.
And then the last question that I have, and if there's some other question from any of the students, please interrupt. As you know, I've spent more time in Barcelona than Madrid. Now I'm regretting that. And it was really interesting yesterday when Javier Cami from AECOM was talking about the historic competition between Barcelona and Madrid, saying that the political stability that he feels in Madrid makes it a better place for investors, not just in the financial industry, but for public investment in social infrastructure, that it's just chaos in Catalonia because of the political situation. Is in place, is that a factor or not? And does Madrid care what's happening in Barcelona, apart from the idea of not seeing a separatist involvement? But it's a little bit outside of the topic of the discussion, but
no. There are a number of things I would like to comment on this. The first thing is that there's 100%. If there's 100% Catalans, not all of them want to become independent. Okay, so remember, elections had maybe 65% attendance, and of that, roughly 50% wanted independence. So you've got a 30% population that wants that. Second, everybody in Spain is very preoccupied with Catalonia. So it's not only Madrid, but the rest of the country is preoccupied about that. And lastly, to wrap up your question with the beginning of my presentation, remember I talked about the 4 Cs: competition, cohabit, coexist, and connect. That's what I think Madrid is doing very well. In a lesser way, maybe Barcelona. And when I was talking about the importance of cities, in a very similar way, this is a very personal and very particular, but in the very same way as London distanced itself from the UK, so now you have London and the rest, or Paris distanced itself from France, so now you have Paris and France. I think Madrid is on the same path. There will be, in the future, there will be a Madrid and the rest of Spain.
Well, that certainly resonates as a New Yorker with our perception of the rest of the country, or at least half of it. Thank you, Luis, for a fascinating talk, that wide-ranging and talking about projects that I was not familiar with, and now I have to come see. If you would like to linger for part of the upcoming talk, I'd like to welcome Ginés Garrido, who's joined us. Thank you.
Hello.
For the next hour.
Good morning.
And we will shift gears and maybe talk a little bit more about public space. But I guess if I didn't say it already, it was also fascinating to see the relation of spaces that can be used by the public in private developments, and also the relation of the towers, to the principal boulevard and the public space, or outside of the Cologne towers. So that would have been another topic for discussion. The connection, how will the decision be made whether that terrace becomes public or private, and or publicly accessible if privately owned. But we were out of time, and I regret that. So thank you. Linger if you would like, and
Thank you.
I will send the recording to your office later on as requested.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, and Rick and hola, Ginés.
Hello, Luis.
Okay.
Hello.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
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 In Dubai, it's yeah. Ginés, we don't know each other, so I want to especially thank you for agreeing so quickly, readily, graciously to participate in the program. As I've been saying at the start of each of the 10 talks, we've now done
10 talks.
We'll do 10 talks. If we had had the privilege of being in Madrid, we would have had double that number. When before the pandemic, we did similar, well, not similar at all. We did field study in place in Paris and in London and Los Angeles. In 5 days, bracketed by 2 enjoyable weekends, we did 20 meetings or construction site visits or tours of recently completed buildings or sites. But this is an experiment in whether one can do virtual field study. I'm not convinced. I'm not sure the students are convinced, but to the degree that the discussions are interesting, why are they interesting? Well, because we're talking about things that we don't know that much about. We may have read a little bit that's been written, but I dare say that no one here has seen the impact of Madrid. No one here on the call has visited Madrid recently enough to see the work going on at Plaza España. So my perception of what characterizes Madrid is based on a long time ago, and I remember the public space, as a Retiro and its relation to the museum. I remember as an architecture student going to the Retiro. There was a kind of I'll call it a corral, a fenced-in area where the wine merchants, the wine distributors, the wine producers in Spain were doing a promotion, and you could pay very, very little money. I forget, 5 pesetas to enter the corral and drink as much wine as you wanted. And for a student, that was amazing. Those wines were all good. The only problem was there was no bathroom. So if you wanted to leave, in New York, there never are public toilets when you need them. And I won't start the conversation about public space in that regard, but I'm fascinated by how well the public spaces in Madrid meet the needs, demographic and socioeconomic, of a very diverse city, I could do a longer introduction of the things that your firm has done, but I did, as you saw by the email, I hope, send both a link to the website and an excerpt from parts of it that, make the introduction plausibly shorter, possibly shorter. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Well, I'm going to talk about Madrid, of course, but I would like also to talk about other projects in which we are involved that are very close related to the engineering and very close related to the infrastructure, because I think our office, I think that most valuable thing is how to deal with this kind of things in how to mix the nature, the public space, and engineering projects. Of course, the Madrid Rio is probably the biggest work that we have done, but we are working in other places in Spain, and I think we can talk about these issues, just showing you other projects.
That would be fine. That would be
So it's a pity that you cannot be here.
so maybe we'll figure out a way of coming later in this calendar year or next.
Yeah,
But it is, yes. Okay, so you have the right. I looked at security settings to share a screen if you'd like. Whenever.
Yeah, I have a presentation. Wait, what about? Yes, yeah. Okay. Yeah, you can see my screen. Yeah. Okay. Wait a moment. Yeah. Well, we are in a small office based in Madrid. Well, we have been working in other places in Europe and also in Latin America, mostly in Peru and in Colombia, in places in which we find the same spirit and the same way of designing the cities, because many places in Latin America are designing in a very innovative way cities and public spaces, but we have I think we have as I said we have a very particular projects in which we share the work with other people, with engineers. No, I would like to begin with this image that probably you know, from Richard Long. Richard Long is a very famous British artist who most of the work that Richard Long done in many places in the world is just to establish a relation between the human and its artificial way of living and the nature, and how these very simple things like this image in which we are seeing this circle of stones in the Pyrenees, in that case in the mountains that we have between Spain, in the north of Spain, between French and Spain, and how to establish this relation between what's happening with the human, what's happening with what we need with our infrastructures, because infrastructure are the way in which we are building the world, and at the same time how to establish a poetic in some way, and also visual relations with the environment in which we are working. So this image for me is extremely inspiring, because you are seeing something extremely artificial that is drawn by the geometric shape of the circle and the chaotic way in which you see these mountains in the north of Spain. So this relation between what we need and the place in which we are working is something very important for us. So I'm going to show 4 projects. 2 of them are bridges. That is, for me, is just something really strong, because we love design bridges, pedestrian bridges and foot bridges. And the first is a very small place in a very small village in the north of Spain, and at the end I will talk about Madrid Rio. So the first thing is the way of the St. James. You know, probably this is in the northwest Spain, is in Galicia, very close to the Atlantic Ocean, and probably you know this network, this extremely powerful infrastructure of networks that it was built during the last 1,000 years by the pilgrims who goes to Santiago. Santiago is the little town in the northwest of Spain because for religion issues. So this network of paths that now are on the table because more and more people, like in many other places in the world, are using these paths for walking, just for enjoy, for know the landscape and the culture of these places. And all these paths are more and more renovation with restoration of the places, of the squares, of the small hotels, and so on. So we have a very small commission that I think is very close to the understanding of what is infrastructure, what is the connection, and what is the node. So sometimes, because infrastructure something is about the connection, and sometimes it's about the node. So in this big path of thousands of kilometers that cross Europe, we are working in a very small village. This is the village. Probably it has, I don't know, 10 people living there, 20 people living there. It's a marvelous place that is crossed by the path. The path has that connect the border with Spain, in between Spain and France, and Santiago de Compostela, which is this small town in the northwest. So, and what we do there, we are working in two places. That is a rule. That is the other thing. So, two places that one is a very small square. It's just a cross of paths that you can see in the middle, and a place for take a rest in a very small creek in which you can wash your feet or something like that. So, but the understanding of the project is the node in which we are working, just identified in places in which something could happen, but at the same time, the rules for building a different categories of urban or more rural way of designing the path. You can see here in the bottom part of the slide how the path could be very urban in the middle of this little town, or completely rural when you are walking in between the towns or in between the villages, and how to establish the rule of the connection, but at the same time what could happen in the nodes or in the junctions. This is one thing, very simple thing, just because a big tree, there is a big tree there, oak, and of course now this is a place that's full of cars without any sense, and we try to establish how to put on a map this tree, and how to put on a map the pedestrians that could cross completely freely using the same rules for designing the pavement around these small places in which you can join, talk with other pilgrims or with the people who is living there. And the other one is a shadow. Yes, it's a very small structure that gives protect from the sun. In summer it's not very hot, but the sun could be hard, in the place in which the path crossed a creek. And then you can see here the different layers in which we have been working. The path that is colored in yellow, the foundations that are completely dry, completely without using concrete, just using stones, the structure of the saddle, and the vegetation that will cover completely this shadow. So it's a place in which you can wash your feet, talk with someone, and take a rest, and reflect about what you are doing, why you are walking, in which way, where you are, etc., etc. So the project consists in find a rule for designing the connection, thinking in that the path is enormous. So we are talking about 1,000 of kilometers of paths, with the idea of extend these rules to many other places along the path. And in the other thing, identified the places in which something could happen, in which people could talk or an event could happen. Very simple thing, but I think extremely delicate, and always flying or playing with the idea of flying structures, something that you know that is protecting you, but you don't know exactly how it's built. The second one is in Toledo. Toledo is a small town going to the south in Madrid. It's about 60 kilometers going to the south. Here, this is the city. So it's a extremely well-preserved city, very old. It was founded by the Romans, but what you see in the middle of the slide is this extremely dense and compact Muslim, Jews, and Christian city in which everything is completely mixed in a hill and surrounded by the river Tajo, which is in the south. And I don't know, but 10 years ago we have a commission for the restoration of the river, of the places that not only in the city, in the whole thing, in which the places in which the river are close to the city, and the I think it's the limits or the, how do you say it? Yeah. So this is the city of Toledo, and you can find these kind of places. Just people goes there just to fishing or take or just walk or run or something like that. But there is a paradox, because the river is about 100 meters under the summit of this hill. So when you are in the river, you are in a paradise, because you cannot see the city. You are completely involved by the nature. So this is a place that is very close to the city. Of course, the city is there because it's the river, but the city and the river are two completely different places. You cannot see the river when you are in the city because it's very compact, and you cannot see the historic city when you are in the river, because the slopes are very, very tight, you know. So we have here the commission for the restorations of the margins of the river along in a big area from about 30 kilometers. So we have been working there for many years, trying to understand this valuable place, completely artificial, but at the same time with a very, very high values in terms of the nature, because the river is an important river, but as I said, very artificial, because in the last 2,000 years, these places had been manipulated by the humans. So the first part of the project was how to deal with this big area. We try to understand in terms of the ecological issues how to reconstruct or renaturalize the borders of the sides of the river, because the river had been the topography had been manipulated for the flood protection and so on, and also in the inner part of the project, in the close part, in which we are close to the city, in which we understand, or we try to understand the events that happens there. The river, of course, is also very artificial, because there are many small dams for producing electricity, all of them from the 19th century, and mills for producing that use the water and so on. So this is a place in which is the mixture between the artificial and the nature is very difficult to distinguish. And this is the place that you see. So this is a very dramatic creek slopes. So here you can see in the left side of the slide the hill in which the city is settled, and the river that is in the bottom part. So here the problem is about accessibility, how to go from the city to the river. That is very uncomfortable because it's easy to go down, but it's not so easy to go up. How to deal with the nature and how to protect the nature there, and at the same time how to offer to the city a place for being in a secure way, in a comfortable way. How to deal with the machinery and the industrial heritage that the river has, and how to cross the river. So you can see here the model, and then you can see these bridges that we propose and which I am going to talk, and this green area that is the places in which we work, and this yellow path that is like a urban salon or urban hall or urban space in which you are in the mixing what's happened up and what's happened down. So this is the model, and you can see here, and this is the sections of this place that are very dramatic, because as I said, when you are down, when you are close to the river, you cannot see nothing instead the nature and the river. Here you can see also the next. Well, of course, we work here in the renaturalization of the slopes and so on. So this is the sections in the different place. But I would like to talk about these bridges. So we designed 3 bridges. Of course, Toledo is an extremely conservative city because it's a very valuable heritage. So everything is extremely difficult. Many people has to talk. Many people has to approve the projects because it's also a UNESCO World Heritage. So how to cross the river without producing an impact and so on. At the same time, how to design a bridge including the flood levels, because it's very narrow, the flood levels is very high, and trying to make something that at the same time is like a miracle. So you are crossing the river in a artificial way that seems to be like flying over the river. So I'm going to talk about this, and this is the bridge. So the bridge is quite long; it's more than 100 meters, and we use the structure that is a stress ribbon. That is, it's like it's a very paradoxical structure because seems to be that is working with extension, but it's not in that way. These pieces are working in compression. So we can cross the river just using only a slab of less than 1 foot of the, I don't know how to say, the gross, the space that we need for the slabs. So everything is extremely slight and very light, but we have to make all of this in the foundations. So this paradox is, for having something extremely light over the river, we need a lot of material and a lot of effort underground. So, because these bridges are, how to say this, it's not, they are not working by gravity, they are working just by the tension that so they need to be completely engaged or something like that to the rock. So the process of understanding how to cross these places, how to use this, the structural typology, and then is what we are talking about. So this is the foundations are extremely complex because everything is very difficult, but this is the way of working with something that is extremely light in this marvelous place. So we can see here. So seems to be just something that looks completely natural, something that seems to be there for many years, but extremely light, but at the same time, just trying to understand that we are in a natural place in some way, but very close to a very compact city that is completely urban, in which the streets are very narrow and everything is extremely artificial. So in this image, you can see this strange place. You are in the river and you see this atmosphere being in the country, in the fields, no? And you can see this is the bridge. So, and the way of what we have to, or what I would like to transmit, is how to select the engineering work for building and designing this kind of things. How to cross seems to be very simple, but it's not. So how to deal with different uses. So this is an engineering problem, but we have to deal with other things that I think is completely very important. Second thing is another bridge. This bridge is in the northwest of Spain also, that cross this big river. In that case, is more important. That this is the border between Spain and Portugal, and because the river is not narrow, so there are very few crosses, so it's not easy to go from one side to the other. Both sides of the river share in some way the same language, because Portuguese is quite similar to Galician, which is the language that they talk. And many things happens in the north and in the side, in the north of the river and the south of the river, in Portugal and in Spain. And we have the commission for building a bridge here that connect a public space that was built in Spain, that is more a cultural space with an auditorium and so on, that you can see here. That is a restoration of a big fortress that we have in here, and you can see here. I don't know. I think you can see my mouse. So this is a fortress, and a few years ago, the Spanish government designed these spaces in which you can drink a beer or take a coffee or go for a theater. And in the other side of the river, that you see in the other side, there is another public space in Portugal that is with swimming pools and more related to families and so on. So two completely different public spaces are one in one side and the other in the other side. But mostly the people cross by car, and Portuguese people goes to the north and Spanish people goes to the south for enjoy weekends or something like that. So the commission is to connect both public spaces in the north and in the south, in Portugal and in Spain, in a very valuable heritage and landscape place. So here the question was, what is the right place for make this connection that establishes the connection between the village in Goyan, who is in Spain, and the village who is in Portugal, that has different issues. For instance, the railway is in the south, is in Portugal. In Spain there are more, water, or so different offers. So both villages offers different things to the population that are in the north or in the south. And of course, this fortress and the surroundings of the fortress in Spain, and this more family open space that is or public space that is in Portugal. So we try to understand where is the right place for this bridge? What is a place in which you can construct in some way a new atmosphere, a new valuable point of view, or of course respect the heritage, and at the same time connect both public spaces that you can see in the image that is in the bottom right part. So this is the two public spaces that the bridge are connected. So the bridge is just also an event. Wait a moment. Okay. Yes. So this is the bridge. In that case, we select another different structural typology. It's a hanging bridge that has the traces of an arch. So for that, many other things related to the way in which the bridge is working are important issues, but the same happens as in the other bridge, in the bridge in Toledo. So for building something that is very, very slight and very light over the river, you need to work a very powerful and very heavy foundations. This is the cross section that also is for bicycles, and this is the foundation that are a big important thing in both sides, with these cables that support the bridge. So how to construct a new event, how to build us in some way, not using a language that is silent, is not very spectacular in some way, so you have the feeling that you are walking over the river. This is one side, and this is one side in this fortress, and this is the other side in Portugal, in which you can see the landing of the bridge, and this is the night view. Now we are building the foundations in both sides, and I would like to talk about how to deal with this. In that case, it's a big infrastructure, because this bridge it has more than 300 meters of a span, so it's a big bridge. How to build a place, but at the same time not being oppressive or giving to the surroundings the importance that I think that have. And this is the last project that you talk about, Madrid Rio. Well, Madrid Rio, well, this is a very big, very complex work in which we are still working. So we began to work in 2005, and now we are still working, and I think we will finish the last work in 2025. So we have been working more than 20 years in this place. So we are really lucky, because this opportunity was fantastic for us. So but what's happened here? Madrid has a river also that you can see that cross the river in a diagonal way, very small river. It's a hilly city, so because the topography that the river and the creeks create is very important for the city, and the origin of the city is in the side of the river, not because the water of the river, is because the high position in terms of defending, and the first settlement was a fortress, a Muslim fortress in the side of the river. Of course, like in many cities, the city grows in a series of different walls that was demolished and again built and go demolished and so on. And the last thing that happens in many places is the rings, the highway rings that are like new walls. In that case is the N30, that is the first ring the first high intense traffic ring that we have, like in many other places. Of course, this highway was settled in the 70s, in the 60s, and in the 70s, 60s and 70s, using the vacant lots and the vacant places. And most of these vacant places was in which creeks and in the sides of the river, because these places was suffer the floods periods, and for that it wasn't built. So the highway was in the 60s and in the 70s in part built on both sides of the river that you can see. Like in many other cities, another more rings or more highways that has been constructed in the last years. So what's happened there? In the 2003, the N30, this highway, was very close to completely collapse, like many other places. And the city decided, and of course the city was the highway was extremely aggressive with the river. That was impossible, completely impossible to walk around, to cross, to walk along. So the river was completely disappear under the bridges on the highway, and the city decided in 2003 to cut and cover, or to put underground, the highway that was built in both sides of the river. And they make it amazing. This is amazing work, extremely complex, because as you can imagine, all the big pipes, all the big infrastructures that the city has was settled underground in both sides of the river in a completely disorder in the last 50 years or 40 years. So for making the tunnels in both sides of the river, they have to remove all the pipes, gas, telecom, water, sewage, everything. They need to move to another place, and they make the tunnels. So it was really a very, very complex civil work that it was making in a very fast way. So they used only 5 years for building this amazing and extremely complex work. As you can see, these tunnels are, of course, this is not about tunnels, because the problem is not a tunnel. The problem is the junction, because you have to, this is like an spaghetti, because when you are a highway, you have to connect with the city, and you have to go down, and then you can cross, and so on. So this is an amazing underground project that was built in 4 years in Madrid between 2003 and 2007. Well, they made it. They make it. So it was a success. Here we can see the mayor, very happy in the opening in May of 2007. But what's happening meantime? Nobody had time for thinking about the city. So for that, in 2007, an enormous vacant lot emerged in the center of the city. So this is so you can see here no cars, because the car was underground, and then we have this enormous vacant lot, and nobody think about it. They don't know what we can do here, because the N30, this green road, is very close to the city center. It's the first. So the city discovered this enormous place in the border of the river, or in the sides of the river, and in a very close to the city center position. So, and the question was, what we can do here? Because we have been working hardly in traffic engineering and tunneling and so on, but nobody think about the city. So in 2005, the city held a competition, an international competition for designing, for asking what we can do here. Because this is not an easy place, because most of the surface is completely artificial, because we are over the slabs of the highway. So you can see here something like seems to be earth, natural earth. It's not. We are over the tunnels of the highway. So the question was what we can do. And we was very lucky because we won the competition. Why? Because we understand that if we are talking about the river here in a very small place of 7 kilometers, we have to understand the river as a whole. The river, the origin of the river is in the river is born in the northwest in the mountains and goes from the northwest to the southeast, across the city. No, it's not a very important river, but it's a valuable river because all the history of the city is related to this place. So we try to understand the geography of the place for solving the problem that we have in a very small place in the river, that in the place in which the river crosses the city. So if you walk along the river in the north, you will be in places like that, in the mountains, in the sierras in the northwest. Then you cross this fantastic forest, very well preserved, this Mediterranean forest that you can walk along 70 or 60 kilometers, and then at the end in the south you can find this lagoon and landscape because the river goes to another river. So the river is very small, but it's very valuable. Many things happens along the river, and we won the competition because the city council understand that okay, we have to know what we are working, and we are working in a geographical issue. The river is not an event of the city. It's in the opposite. The city is an event of the river. Okay, and of course, many other things happens in the river because this place in which the highway was settled in the borders or in the sides of the river, in the banks of the river, was like a cat in the network of the green spaces of the city of Madrid, that is of course completely connected with the topography and of course with the hydrology of the city, because the creeks and the city and the river is the way in which the city has been built, and the green spaces build these spaces through the topography and through the ways in which the creeks goes to the river. So solving this small part, the whole connection of the river has a completely different understanding. So it was very important to understand that we are not working in the city, we are working in the river, and what's happened is how to connect the landscape that we have in the north with the landscape that we have in the south through the city. And of course, another tissue, another network of green spaces appear in the city that was completely hidden by the highways, because as I said, many of these highways was settled in the banks of the creeks or in the banks of the river. So this project is like the keystone of a bigger structure that now we can enjoy in the city. So well, the highway was built in the banks of the river, like many other places in the world, and of course, knowing that most of the space in which we work, we had been working, is completely artificial. It's this complex spaghetti of networks, of pipes, sewage, highway, tunnels, electricity, telecom. All of these things in a very compact city was settled and put during the years in the same place. And we built is the right word. So build this open and green space over this artificial construction and this big construction that is underground. And I have a few photographs of the project that you can enjoy this. So now, well, these photographs are 10 years, it was taken 10 years ago, so now the trees are bigger, and I think it's very strong. So visiting this place is really strong, because you have the feeling that the city is completely renovated, because of course the neighborhood was so the river was the back part of the neighborhoods. Now is it in the core, in the center, so completely a big part of the city changed completely because of this project. So, and yes, I have this series of photographs of the places in which we have been working, trying to, I would like to say, behind these gardens, there is a huge highway and a huge amount of infrastructures, because of course infrastructure is not only about vehicles, not about cars, it's about all the things that we need. Many of them are extremely expensive. High tension electricity, high pressure gas pipes, and all these things are really in the same place. So behind is these constructions. So you can see these places that was completely occupied by the highway and the junctions, of course, because and now we have this space that seems to be completely natural, but it's not. Seems to be that had been there for many years, but it's not. And of course we was very lucky, because it was a very big success in terms of the people, the citizens, that enjoy every day, every hour. So as you can see here, of course we have to deal with infrastructures, because we have to build some bridges, because the highway was in the banks of the city, of the river. For crossing from one side to the other, you have to go up, and then you have to go down, and then you cross the highway, and so on. So for that we design many bridges and other infrastructures like sport and so on. So well, this is the atmosphere of this place. That is in some way like a restoration of something that, I don't know, perhaps 100 years ago or 300 years ago disappeared, because the city was very aggressive with these places. Okay, and well, that's it. So
It's an amazing presentation. Thank you, Ginés.
thank you.
I have many reactions and observations and questions that I'd like to share, but I'd like to maybe start with questions from the students. I see Akash, your hand is up.
Hello.
Thank you, sir, for the beautiful presentation.
Thank you.
So my question is regarding the bridge which you told, which connects Spain and Portugal. Did you construct an international border post, because it is linking two countries, and I see that the bridge is not very wide? So was there an international border post for checking when you cross the two countries?
Yeah. Well, there is no checking point, because in Europe there is no checking point in between Portugal and Spain, and there is no checking point between France and Spain. So many of the countries that we in the core of Europe are completely free. So you can cross the border without knowing if you are in one country or in the other. In that case, I think it's very important, because this is an international bridge, and for that, what is really complex is the permissions. Because you need a permission for the army, from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and everything is very complex, because the bureaucracy is very complex, because you are building a bridge that has a construction in both sides in different countries. But in terms of the border, it doesn't exist. You can cross, and in reality, people that lives in one side or lives in the other are completely mixed. So the border was closed for many years, for hundreds of years, and because Portugal and Spain were, of course, like many other places, were enemies in some way. They were fighting for the fishing areas and something like that, but now it doesn't exist. So there is no checking point. It's completely free.
Thank you, sir.
Unchi, you had your hand up before. You still have a question? If not,
I don't have questions.
okay,
so
I'll go to
far.
Hangjin.
Thank you for the presentation, and I have a question about the bridges. So you mentioned that the technology and the design used in the bridges is very difficult. So it will have a lot of risks. So how you control that?
Yeah, well, I think it's not difficult because many places, many people knows about that. What I think is difficult and I think is not usual is a close collaboration between people who understand cities and landscapes and engineers. So this disconnection between these two disciplines sometimes produce horrible things. So a bridge always could be a marvelous piece of art in some way, a marvelous piece of infrastructure, but we need to collaborate. So I think the work has to be done by different people who has different points of view. But the most important thing for designing the bridge, of course, I'm talking about the small bridges because all of these are pedestrian. We are not designing enormous bridges in which the problem is different. Now, so here, what is more difficult is to select the right structural typology. This is the critical thing, because you can design many different bridges with different structural typologies, but to select the right one is not easy. It's not easy because you have to understand in one point the foundations, what is the problem that you have in the foundation, and on the other hand, you have to take in account what is the experience also for the pedestrian, because when you are walking or biking a bridge, you are living a valuable experience because you are over the river or because you have a long vistas. Do you understand me? So taking in account what's happening with the people who is walking or crossing the river is also important, and this is a process of working in which you need to take in account different disciplines and different people working together. And this is what I would like to know, because to say, because it's not usual. So I'm very happy to have this opportunity of building small bridges that is very close related to public spaces, because in some way the bridge is also a public space in which you are in the middle of the bridge and then you kiss your girlfriend or something like that because you feel some emotions because you are there. So how to engage all these issues is the most difficult thing.
Yeah, thank you.
Emil.
Yeah, thank you for a really beautiful presentation. I just had a question regarding the final project that you showed to us for the revitalization of the river banks. So since there was a lot of demolition works that was required and there was significant scope of work for the civil infrastructure, like removal of the pipelines and the high pressure pipelines that, as you mentioned before, was this project completely sponsored and financed by the government, or was there also involvement of the private sector here?
Yeah. Everything was paid by the government. By about 70% was paid by the city, or 75% was paid by the city, 30% was paid by the region, and 10% was paid by the central state. So I understand your question, because of course this is this is very exceptional. So probably I think it's impossible to repeat this situation, because now the things are working in a different way. So you need the private investment. of course, so because states are not so rich for make these big investments. But in that case, something that was very paradoxical was, I think is interesting, because mainly the money was public. So mainly the neighborhoods that was more benefit or find more benefits was the people and the neighborhood that was beside the highway. So poor people, more of them immigrants, and so it was a public investment that benefit the whole city, but at the same time the neighborhoods that was more poor in the city, because they was completely disconnected. So because the highway was extremely aggressive, so with the, well, you know these places, of course, because these things happens everywhere. So you know, when you are very close to the highway, you are completely disconnected. So you are isolated. So this is something that happens, and you are in a noisy place, and you are in a polluted place. So the money was public, but of course, many urban redevelopment happens now in the last 10 years and will happen in the next years. So of course there is a revenue, a very important revenue for private places, but the money was completely public.
Thank you for answering.
Other questions or thoughts to share?
I just had like a follow-up question.
Yeah.
Were there any like environmental considerations while you were designing this project? Like, did you come across any of the issues or challenges related to the conservation of certain natural resources in this region?
Yeah, of course. Well, this is another issue. Of course, the people who are working in the environmental issues are very important, and these are disciplines that we have to take in account. In the case of Madrid, it's not easy to explain, because Madrid is a very compact city. It's a very artificial place, and the project that we made is really artificial. It's not about nature. Seems to be completely nature, but it's not nature. So of course there is many environmental issues related to the water, related to the sewage of the city, related to the how to clean this the water, the rainfall water that goes freely in the past to the river. That it was, of course, this rainfall water is extremely polluted and very contaminated. So many issues related to the water, how to manage the water was implemented. Also issues related to the smoke of the cars, because we are when the cars are in a tunnel, you have the possibility of filter of the air that goes up or to the atmosphere. So for that, the pollution is you can control the pollution of the cars. But the main thing in the case of Madrid was related to urban issues more than environmental issues, because it's a really artificial place. Many things happens after that. Animals, birds, bees, many things, because we plant thousands of trees. But the issue is more related to urban issues. And we have to take in account another thing that is very, I think is funny, because this is not like Central Park. Central Park is planted on the ground. So in 200 years it will be the same place with all very old trees. This is not the case, because we have a highway underground. So I don't know what will happen in the next 100 years, because I suppose that in 100 years I can imagine that you can drive a car in I don't know, in the next century. So what would happen with the underground structure, and what would happen with the obsolescence of this structure is an important thing. So this is a park that is built over an artificial construction, and you have to take in account what would happen. I don't know, perhaps in 100 years, this tunnel is full of servers, I don't know, or full of water, I don't know. But this is not like it's not planted in the ground. This is important.
Other questions? Lucia, your hand is up. You have a question? Or not?
Yeah, I have a question.
Please.
Yeah, firstly, thank you for sharing these fantastic projects. And I wonder, does this waterfront park has any unique design to make it better or more special public space for people to rest or network?
Excuse me, I think I don't understand. You are talking about the water. What's happened with the water?
No, waterfront park, the last one project. Does it
Last
have?
one?
Yeah, does it have any unique design to make it a better or a very special public space for people to rest or communicate?
Yeah, of course. Yes, yes. So designing a public space is about thinking in people, about thinking in citizens. So you have to take in account how they feel, how they identify the place, how they are going to use. Sometimes you cannot control because the people use the places in the way they want. So of course for us to try to understand the demands of the citizens, not only the people who live close to the park, also people who lives in places that are farther, is extremely important, of course. And the other thing that I think is important is how, and this is something that happens when you are designing a public spaces, because of course we are architects, we are thinking in a very high culture issues in some way. So we have to establish the contact or the point in which your desires or your idea of building something that belongs to the high culture could be engaged by the people who don't want to talk about high culture. They just want to enjoy the place. So without being banal. So this is the key, how to be in the middle point between the banality of the desires of the people, like you or like me or like my mother, and the ambition of building something that belongs to the history in the capital letters. But of course, people and citizens are extremely important, extremely important. If not, you will fail. You will fail. People needs to love the place in which they are enjoying.
Thank you.
Excellent point on which to end. I would just like to echo the thanks of the students, Ginés, and share the thought that the projects have in common an issue of connectivity. All of the projects at whatever scale, the Camino de Santiago is a part of a historic and incredible system of connection. The smaller bridges and the riverfront park all are about connection. We've seen the efforts toward connection in other cities around the world. Projects that are in some ways similar, by the small scale connecting bridges or pedestrian bridges, particularly, or I think in New York, the Hudson River Park, in Paris, the Berge de Seine. There are many riverfront parks from Pittsburgh to other places we could talk about, but this is done so skillfully and with such attention to the integration, as you were describing, of infrastructure. The example in New York, and I'd love to walk it with you the next time you come to the States, is the High Bridge, which is not too far from the Columbia campus. Washington Heights. It was built as part of the Croton Aqueduct system in the 1840s. I think it was finished in 1848. And it was the pedestrian bridge on top of the infrastructure that brought water from the mountains to the north to the Croton Reservoir, where the public library is now in Midtown. And it was closed for 40 or 50 years, ostensibly because of issues of fears of structural problems, which were fictive. It was all about the socioeconomic disparities on either side of a pedestrian bridge, perceived risks and distances. It seemed a little ironic, you know, that on the border between Portugal and Spain, there was a fortress, and that fortress wasn't built for nothing, you know, and it wasn't just about fishing rights. There, you know, there were two major global powers competing worldwide. There was no love lost. The symbolism of the connectivity is just amazing. And you know, thank you for doing it so skillfully. And then the last observation, you know, a link, if not between Madrid, although why not, and New York, but certainly between Toledo and New York, is of course one of the most famous paintings in the world, and certainly in the Metropolitan Museum. So I was looking on my little screen at the El Greco's view of Toledo, and it's a very famous view, like one of your renderings, where the hills are green and the city is sort of gray and high and far, and the storm. And what I read about, you know, just now, I mean, I'm not a scholar of El Greco, but he took some liberties with where the architectural elements were in the city to compose the ideal city and make connection points, or at least overcome the differences in height that you've done, you know, all these years later, 1600, how many years later, you know.
No, it's a marvelous painting because it's strange, very strange. I think this is the reason, because it's owned by the Metropolitan, because being a extremely religious significant, you see the storm, the black gray sky, the greenery. So it's like a landscape that is, but 300 years before the landscape painters. So
it was the first landscape painting in Spain, and it was a rule against landscape painting, and they thought maybe it was a part of something bigger. But there's one other painting that he did that's much more architectural, or at least much more planning. That's in Spain, where it belongs. Anyway, couldn't help but thinking of you know, how you overcome the difference in height. And you know, I don't want to belong this. I mean, we're at our time limit, but you know, I've been thinking a lot because my daughter is a geographer in Lima, and the difference in height where they live in Miraflores to the sea, and the way that the use of the ocean front on the Pacific is different from the public space, you know, so many meters higher. How you overcome the height difference and make connections, including pedestrian bridges across a highway that should disappear. But the part of the reason that not more is done down below, but more and more is because of the fear of flooding, the fear of tsunami. And that would be my last question to you. I was trying to get a sense of if there has been, with climate change and with extreme weather, flash flooding in Madrid. And there was an article from 2 years ago that talked about flooding in Madrid. But is that not an issue on waterfront parks? Because we address that all the time in New York. East Side Coastal Resilience Park, which was one of my projects when I worked for the city not too long ago, you know, was elevated rather than made natural because of very conservative fears about, you know, storm surge and sea level rise.
Of course. This is a big problem in Spain, but not in the case of Madrid, because the river is completely controlled. The water flow is completely controlled with a series of dams. So historically, many flood disaster happens, but now the river is completely artificial from the origin to the end. So this is not an issue. But the problem that we have is the lack of water. There's a lack of water. This is really a very big problem in Spain. How to manage the amount of water that is going down and going down. Also because the evaporation is bigger because the heat and so on. So the problem is more about the lack of water. This is a very easy problem. So.
Thank you.
Well, I would like to say something about Lima.
Yeah, please.
Because Lima is an incredible place. I know very well Lima because I have 3 projects there. Now we are working there in the restoration of the Parque de la Exposición,
Yeah,
and we have been so we have different projects there. I have been there many places, and I think it's very interesting, very interesting place because it's a place with this strange weather, no rain, very humid, not sunny, but in Ecuador. So I would like to talk about Lima sometime.
Well, you know, I look forward to having the chance to meet in person, maybe there. But,
okay,
before the pandemic,
fantastic.
I was going 2 or 3 times a year, and my wife and I were there last week for the first time in over 2 years, and it's just amazing. But you know, the question I wanted to ask you, I shouldn't, is will your project for the art museum from Mali be built? Because my son-in-law, who's Peruvian, was talking a little bit about the politics and the
yeah. I don't know. We are still working, but I don't know what will happen. I don't know what would happen.
So good luck.
Thank you.
And we'll see each other sometime, whether in Madrid, New York, or Lima, I'm sure.
Okay.
Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Well, thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.